When you disappear emotionally, something far more unsettling happens than simple absence. A narcissistic woman is not bonded to you through love in the traditional sense, but through regulation. You were a stabilizing mechanism for her inner world. Your attention, your reactions, your availability acted as a mirror that kept her sense of self intact. The moment that mirror vanishes, the psyche does not feel peace, it feels disruption. Most men believe that being missed comes from making a grand emotional impression. In reality, it comes from removing the supply that quietly maintained control. When you stop explaining yourself, stop reacting, stop trying to be understood, her nervous system enters unfamiliar territory. The pattern she relied on is broken. And the human psyche, especially one structured around dominance and validation, cannot tolerate unresolved patterns for long. Carl Jung spoke often about the power of the unconscious to fill gaps with projections. When you withdraw, her mind does not go silent, it grows louder. She begins to replay conversations, reanalyze moments, and search for meaning where none is offered. Your absence becomes symbolic. You are no longer a man she can manage, you become a question she cannot answer. This is why emotional withdrawal must be clean, not dramatic. Anger still feeds her, explanations still center her. Silence, when paired with self-respect, removes her access to your inner world. And without that access, she loses the ability to regulate her self-image through you. What emerges is not immediate longing, but psychological tension. And tension is the birthplace of obsession. It's important to understand this is not manipulation. It is boundary restoration. You are no longer performing a role assigned to you. You are reclaiming psychic energy that was outsourced to someone who thrived on controlling it. In doing so, you step out of her psychological orbit. And here is the paradox most men miss. She begins to feel your absence only when you are no longer trying to be felt. The moment you stop managing how she perceives you, you regain authority over yourself. Remember this, when you remove the mirror, the one who depended on it is forced to look inward. And not everyone can survive what they see. Once emotional supply is removed, the next instinct most men fall into is reaction. They want justice, closure, recognition. They want her to feel something: anger, regret, guilt. But this is precisely where power is lost. A narcissistic woman is not disturbed by your emotions, she is energized by them. Whether you love her or hate her, react to her or confront her, you are still orbiting her center. Indifference, however, is something else entirely. Indifference cannot be used, mirrored, or manipulated. It introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is intolerable to a psyche built on control. From a Jungian perspective, narcissistic personalities depend on predictable emotional feedback to maintain their persona, the carefully constructed image they present to the world. When you react emotionally, you confirm that persona. When you become neutral, calm, and internally unavailable, you fracture it. She no longer knows who she is in relation to you, and that destabilization is far more unsettling than conflict. This is why rage, accusations, or dramatic exits fail. They signal investment. They say, "You still matter enough to move me." Indifference says nothing, and that silence forces her unconscious to fill in the blanks. Was she misjudged? Has she lost influence? Did she miscalculate her value? These unanswered questions linger long after loud emotions fade. True indifference is not an act. It is not coldness performed to provoke a reaction. It is the natural outcome of reclaiming your internal authority. You stop narrating your pain. You stop defending your reality. You stop trying to correct her version of events. You simply step back into yourself. Jung warned that whatever we resist emotionally gains power over us. By refusing to engage emotionally, you remove resistance, and with it, her leverage. You are no longer fighting the shadow, you are walking out of its reach. Here is the subtle truth. When she can no longer read you, she begins to imagine you. When she can no longer provoke you, she begins to pursue clarity. Indifference transforms you from a controllable figure into an unresolved symbol. Carry this with you. Anger keeps you tied. Explanations keep you small. But indifference, real indifference, returns you to yourself. And the man who no longer needs to be understood is the man who cannot be forgotten after indifference settles in. Something even more unsettling begins to occur, not in her, but in you. You start to re-enter your own life. This is the phase most misunderstood because men often believe growth is something to be displayed. But psychological evolution is not loud. It is disruptive precisely because it cannot be tracked. A narcissistic woman maintains control by categorizing you. You are placed into a role, dependable, emotional, predictable, reactive. Once categorized, you are manageable. Jung understood this deeply. He taught that the ego clings to labels because labels reduce uncertainty. When you begin to reclaim your identity, not as a performance, but as an internal restructuring, you escape those labels. And when you escape them, you become psychologically illegible. This is not about proving anything to her. The moment growth is done to be seen, it becomes another form of dependence. True individuation happens in silence. Your values sharpen, your routines solidify. Your body, mind, and boundaries align. You are no longer motivated by being chosen. You are motivated by becoming whole. From her perspective, this creates a disturbance. She cannot reconcile the man she thought she understood with the one she now observes from a distance. You no longer respond the way you used to. Your priorities have shifted. Your energy is no longer available for emotional extraction. And because narcissistic psychology relies on fixed narratives, your transformation introduces cognitive dissonance. Jung called this encounter with the unknown the confrontation with the self. When you move toward your own center, you stop revolving around another's gravity. You are no longer a character in her story. You are the author of your own. That alone makes you dangerous to any psyche built on dominance. What she misses is not simply the old version of you, but the certainty she once had about you. Humans fear uncertainty more than loss. And when you become a man she cannot define, predict, or reduce, you remain unresolved in her unconscious. So the task is simple but not easy. Become so grounded in who you are becoming that you no longer say. Recognition for it. Growth that asks to be witnessed is fragile. Growth that happens in solitude is permanent. Remember this, when you stop trying to be someone she understands, you finally become someone she cannot forget. As your identity stabilizes, something else must change. Access. Not as punishment, not as strategy, but as a natural consequence of self-respect. Constant availability is often mistaken for devotion, yet in narcissistic dynamics it functions as permission. Permission to intrude, to extract, to devalue. When you are always reachable, you are never rare. A narcissistic woman does not desire what is endlessly accessible. She may enjoy it, use it, even depend on it. But desire requires distance. Jung understood that the psyche is energized by tension between opposites. When there is no distance, no space, no uncertainty, the unconscious goes dormant. When access is removed, tension returns, and with it attention. Reducing access is not about disappearing dramatically. It is about narrowing entry points to your time, emotions, and inner world. You stop answering immediately. You stop making yourself available on demand. You stop offering emotional labor without reciprocity. This is not coldness, it is selectivity. And selectivity signals value. From her perspective, this shift creates a subtle panic. The man who was once instantly reachable now has a life that does not bend around her. Conversations are shorter. Encounters are fewer. The psychological message is unmistakable. You are no longer the center of my orbit. That message alone can trigger reevaluation long after she claimed disinterest. Scarcity works not because it manipulates, but because it reveals. It reveals who respects boundaries and who resents them. Narcissistic personalities often react with entitlement or contempt when access is reduced, because they interpret boundaries as rejection. But what they truly feel is loss of control. Jung wrote that what we do not possess consciously, we seek unconsciously. When access is unlimited, nothing is sought. When access becomes limited, the unconscious awakens. Questions arise, value is reassessed, desire is rekindled, not for closeness, but for influence. The danger here is inconsistency. If you remove access only to restore it under pressure, you teach her that boundaries are negotiable. Scarcity must be stable to be effective. It must come from a life that is genuinely full, not from tactics. Take this with you. When you protect your time and energy, you are not withdrawing, you are defining. And the man who defines access to himself becomes someone others must earn, not assume. When access is reduced and your life no longer revolves around her, the final disturbance emerges, not through words, but through presence, or more accurately, through the absence of explanation. Is where silent confidence begins to operate, and it is often misunderstood. Silence is not avoidance, it is containment. A narcissistic woman is accustomed to reading emotional signals. Tone, timing, expression, these are the instruments through which she measures influence. When you speak less, explain less, and reveal less, those instruments fail. What remains is uncertainty, and uncertainty compels attention. Carl Jung observed that the unconscious responds not to declarations, but to symbols. Silent confidence functions symbolic. Ali, you do not announce strength, you embody it. Your posture, your pacing, your restraint communicate more authority than any speech ever could. And because it cannot be argued with or dismantled, it unsettles those who rely on control. This is why overcommunication weakens men in narcissistic dynamics. Explaining your boundaries, justifying your distance, or narrating your healing process turns strength into something negotiable. Silence, when grounded in clarity, removes negotiation entirely. It sends a simple psychological message. I know where I stand, and I do not need you to agree. From her perspective, this creates delayed attraction, not the impulsive desire driven by ego, but the lingering pull of something unresolved. She senses change, but cannot locate it. You are no longer reactive, yet not hostile, present, yet unreachable. This ambiguity activates projection. She begins to assign meaning to your silence because meaning is no longer provided. Silent confidence also protects you. It prevents emotional leakage. It keeps your progress intact. Jung warned that prematurely exposing inner transformation invites interference from others' shadows. When you move quietly, your evolution remains undisturbed. The key is authenticity. Forced silence is brittle. It cracks under pressure. True silence emerges when you no longer feel compelled to explain yourself to be valid. It is the byproduct of inner alignment, not a tactic. Carry this forward. When your strength no longer needs a voice, your presence becomes louder than words. And the man whose silence is rooted in self-knowledge becomes someone others feel before they ever understand. At a certain point, something decisive happens. Not in her behavior, not in the dynamic, but in your inner orientation. You stop waiting. You stop measuring progress by her reactions. You stop needing the outcome. And paradoxically, this is the moment when the psychological balance fully shifts. Narcissistic dynamics survive on anticipation, on hope, fear, longing, and the quiet monitoring of another's attention. The moment you detach from the result, you exit the game entirely. Jung would describe this as the ego relinquishing its grip, allowing the self to take the lead. When you are no longer driven by the need to be chosen, You reclaim sovereignty over your inner world. Detachment is often mistaken for indifference, but it is deeper than that. Indifference is emotional neutrality. Detachment is existential freedom. You are no longer anchored to a story where validation must come from a specific source. Your sense of worth is internal, stable, and non-negotiable. This is deeply unsettling to a narcissistic psyche because there is nothing left to leverage. From her perspective, something essential is lost: influence. She may sense that you are no longer tracking her moods, her interest, or her absence. You are no longer adjusting yourself in anticipation of approval or rejection. And because narcissistic attraction is rooted in control rather than intimacy, the loss of control often registers as longing. But this is no longer your concern. True detachment dissolves the need to be missed. You are not withholding to provoke desire. You are simply complete without the outcome. Jung believed that psychological power emerges when opposites are integrated, when desire exists without attachment and strength without aggression. This integration marks maturity. This is the final inversion most men never reach. The moment she could miss you most is the moment you no longer need her to. You are no longer oriented toward her psyche, but toward your own path. What remains is quiet authority, not over her, but over yourself. And that is the real aim: not to be remembered, not to be chased, not to be validated, but to be free. So reflect on this when you release the need for the outcome. You gain something far greater than her attention. You gain yourself.